Hello everyone, and welcome to my Beast Mastery Phase 3 Best in Slot video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what is absolute BiS for Phase 3, with and without PvP gear. Afterwards, we'll take a look at when and how you can transition from Tier 5 to Tier 6, and then we're going to take a look at items individually in each gear set, and we'll discuss a few good high priority items, as well as a few good alternatives for each slot. And finally, at the end of the video, we're going to take a look at what you should prioritize if your guild runs a 3-item wish list, or you use a BiS list such as That's My BiS. Starting in Phase 3, we now have access to the Armor Pen and Haste gear, and depending on whether your bosses you're going to be fighting have 6200 armor or 7700 armor, your gear skill set will look slightly different. In a perfect world, you would aim to acquire all these items so you can just swap gear sets between bosses as required. However, this is highly unrealistic, so you should just focus on a single BiS gear set and work towards it. The first gear set we're going to look at is Absolute BiS for 7700 armor bosses, and starting off with the helm we have Cursed Vision of Sargeras, socketed with a Delicate Crimson Spinal and Relentless Earthstorm. For the neck, we have Choker Serrated Blades. For the shoulders, we have Gronstalker Spalders, socketed with 2 Delicate Crimson Spinals. For the cloak, we continue to use the Elastian Wilder Cloak. For the chest, we have Gronstalker Chest Guard, socketed with 1 Delicate Crimson Spinal and 2 Jagged Sea Spray Emeralds. For the bracers, we use Insidious Bands, socketed with a Wicked Firestone. For the gloves, we use Gronstalker Gloves, socketed with a Delicate Crimson Spinal. For the belt, we have Don Alondra's Money Belt, socketed with 2 Delicate Crimson Spinals. For the legs, we use Gronstalker Leg Guards, socketed with a Delicate Crimson Spinal, and this finishes our 4-piece Tier 6. Moving on to the boots, we use Shadow Master's Boots, socketed with 1 Delicate Crimson Spinal and 1 Wicked Firestone. For the rings, we have Storm Rage Signet Ring and Band of the Eternal Champion. For our trinkets, we have DST, and for our second trinket, we finally replaced Bloodless Brooch with Madness of the Betrayer. Next up, we have the Mainhand and Offhand. You're going to use Boundless Agony in your main hand with Blade of Infamy in your offhand for 7700 armor bosses. And finishing up, we're going to look at our bows. Ideally, you would want Bristleblitz Striker for maximum DPS. However, later in the video, we're going to discuss when and why you would want to use Black Bow of the Betrayer instead. Moving on to the differences for 6200 really quickly. The only difference is that either the Season 3 main hand or offhand fist weapon with Boundless Agony is going to be the BiS option. This is a minor upgrade compared to the 7700 armor set, so if you're not a PvPer or you can't dedicate the time to grinding out the rating for 1850, then Boundless Agony with Blade of Infamy is still your best option to go for. Let's take a look now at when we can transition from Tier 5 to Tier 6. There are a few ways we can go about this, and all the options will be linked in the video description, so we're not going to go over every option here as there's just way too many and it would drag on forever. There are several ways we can go about reaching 2-piece Tier 6 early, and that's using either the shoulders and gloves or your shoulders and legs. And sets have been made to show the possibility for having either the Lar fist weapons or Twin Blade, whatever you were able to pick up in Phase 2. Other pieces of gear you're going to be swapping around to make the transition possible for early 2-piece Tier 6 include the Edgewalker Long Boots, and either Ring of Lethality, Garona's Signet Ring, or Ring of 1000 Marks. And for moving into 4-piece Tier 6 early, having Sure Straight Goggles 2.0 can be very helpful in maintaining your hit cap. Now that we've taken a look through gear sets as a whole, let's take a look through some gear slots individually and discuss some alternatives and important points for certain pieces. Starting with the Helms, our absolute BiS in Phase 3 is Cursed Vision of Sargeras. This piece is incredibly good for hunters and is the single biggest upgrade we will get in Phase 3 outside one of our bow upgrades. Cursed Vision, however, is the best option for practically every other physical class, and the upgrade for classes such as Fury Warriors is as big for them as it is for us, so loot priority on a piece like this should be based more on the individual player's skill and current gear situation over just a class priority. A few decent alternatives to Cursed Vision are the Season 3 Helm, Gronstalker Helmet, and Forest Prowler's Helm. However, you should never directly prioritize any of these alternatives as they're quite worse. For the next, Choker Serrated Blades is absolute BiS in all situations and is an excellent item all around. While I shouldn't necessarily put this as a top priority, it would be a good idea to pick it up sooner rather than later if you do not have Telonicus' pendant. The DPS differences between Serrated Blades and Telonicus is minor, so you can pass this to other classes at first, providing you do have Telonicus. A good alternative and temporary pickup would be Choker of Endless Nightmares. The 21 hit rating could help you move into Tier 6 gear sooner if you're missing one of the earlier mentioned items, and then be replaced later on when possible. For the cloaks, we continue to use the Elastian Wilder Cloak into Phase 3. The stats on this cloak are simply unmatched by anything offered in Phase 3. The only decent alternative would depend on whether or not you need hit rating at the time, and you can swap back to either Drape of the Dark Reapers from Karazhan if you still had it, or you can grab Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape. I would actually recommend that you pick up Shadow Moon Destroyer's Drape, as this cloak is beneficial in multiple gear sets that exclude some of the other big items such as Cursed Vision of Sargeras, Madness of the Betrayer, and Stormrage Signet Ring, as well as being used in Phase 4 to allow for a quick transition between Madness of the Betrayer into Berserker's Call Trinket. For the chest, there's only one good option, and that's the Grondstalker's Chest Guard. This piece will be highly contested compared to a few of the other tier tokens, as this is one of the two pieces of tier that Fury Warriors and Protection Warriors ideally want. It is recommended that you don't swap over to tier 6 until you have at least 2-piece tier 6 and have some of the supporting gear with hit rating to allow for it. However, the tier 6 chest is not one of the better pieces to transition into tier 6 early with, and not worth breaking your tier 5 4-piece bonus early for like it was in Phase 2 when we can break Beast Lord early for tier 5 2-piece. For the wrists, we have two decently close options. The piece you really want to aim for, however, is Insidious Bands. These provide the best overall DPS stats while also providing a bit of hit rating we're going to desperately want and need for transitioning into tier 6 gear. Another good option for the wrist slot is Binding of Lightning Reflexes. This is where we're going to start to see static haste on gear. However, at this point the amount is quite low and does not provide any significant gain. Swift Strike Bracers are another option and just slightly worse version of Lightning Reflexes. If you already had Band Braces of Ending though from Tempest Keep, would highly recommend you just stick to these until you acquire Insidious Bands. For the gloves, we again only have one correct option, and that is the Grondstalker's Gloves. This is one of the tier pieces that is the best for us to acquire early on, as it can be used to break from 4-piece tier 5 into 2-piece tier 6 early for a small DPS gain. Luckily, Fury Warriors and Protection Warriors don't want this token, so our only competition would be the Shamans. For the belt slot, we have quite a few options here, and depending on whether or not you need hit rating, will determine what belt you should be using at any given time. For the absolute best option, you want to be using Don Alonso's Money Belt. If you're tight on hit rating, you can continue to use Belt of the Deep Shadows, and if you didn't acquire one of these in Phase 2, then you can aim for Boneweave Girdle as a temporary side grade. Other options available to us are the Veilstalker Girdle and Shadowwalker's Cord. These two belts are nearly identical to each other in DPS stats. However, like the wrists, the low amount of static haste rating on them alone is insignificant to be worthwhile. For the legs, we have Grondstalker's Leg Guards. This token is contested by Protection Warriors as well as Shamans, and from my understanding, Fury Warriors ideally don't want to use the 4-piece tier 6. This is one of the pieces that you can potentially swap out with other options. However, the DPS loss is big enough that you really wouldn't want to do this as a Beast Mastery Hunter. If you absolutely had to pick something else, then you can replace Cursed Vision of Sargeras for Grondstalker's Helmet, and then use the Bow Stitch Leggings. However, these are the best in slot for survival hunters, so under no circumstances should you take these from them. The other option available is Shady Dealer's Pantaloons. However, like Bow Stitch, these shouldn't be prioritized over Grondstalkers as the DPS loss is quite big. For the boots, we use Shadow Master's Boots for Absolute BiS. There's nothing else that really comes close to them in terms of DPS output. However, if you're going to pinch again for hit rating and either soft set boots of tracking or quick strider moccasins drop, then you could offer these as a temporary side grade. It is worth mentioning that soft set boots of tracking are absolute BiS for enhancement shamans, so you should not take these over them, even if you're just going to use them as a temporary side grade. For the rings, we have Stormrage Signet Ring and Band of the Eternal Champion. Stormrage Signet Ring is another crucial piece of gear we need to sustain our hit cap. However, like Cursed Vision of Sargeras, this item is going to be highly contested by pretty much all physical DPS. This ring is almost absolute BiS up until Phase 5 for rogues as well, so this will be a high priority item for them. For hunters, the DPS stats are better than what we previously used, and the ARP stacked with the rest of our gear set makes it incredibly strong. Our second ring will be Band of the Eternal Champion, and this is a no-brainer as the stats as well as the proc chance on this ring make it unmatched by anything else. Alternatives to Stormrage Signet Ring would be Ring of Deceitful Intent and Band of Devastation, and actually using Band of the Ranger General in Phase 3 is a very good alternative. If you didn't manage to obtain Band of the Ranger General in Phase 2 then, Ring of Deceitful Intent is a good side grade to pick up temporarily. For the Trinkets, DST remains our BiS and will continue to be BiS for the entire game. Bloodless Brooch, however, is finally replaced by Madness of the Betrayer. This is a very powerful trinket as well as another major hit item for us, so putting this as a high priority would be a good idea. Ashtongue Talisman of Swiftness is another good alternative to Bloodless Brooch, and it only requires Exalted Rep with Ashtongue Deathsworn, so you won't have to rely on any RNG for a drop. Bloodless Brooch itself, however, is still perfectly viable, and being able to control the trinkets usage with your cooldowns will remain favorable for quite a few people. For the bows, we have two options: Bristle Blitz Striker and Black Bow of the Betrayer. There's a few things to consider when deciding which bow you want or what you should actually be aiming for. First thing to consider is your guild's raid uptime on Judgment of Wisdom. If your paladins continuously struggle to maintain Judgment of Wisdom, then the mana drain of Black Bow would be beneficial to you. The other consideration in Black Bow's favor is speedrunners. It's not going to be a massive amount of mana gain, however it will slightly help you while you're pulling quickly and you don't have a chance to fully drink up, and your runes or pots are on cooldown. If neither of these issues are a concern for you or you're not a speedrunner, then going for Bristleblitz Striker is the better option. Lastly, we have the Mainhand and Offhand weapons to look at. With Phase 3, we have quite a few options available to us, as well as the Season 3 fist weapons being really good for this phase. Starting with bosses that have 7700 armor, your best option is going to be Boundless Agony in the Mainhand, with Blade of Infamy in the Offhand, and for 6200 armor bosses, you're going to continue to use Boundless Agony in the Mainhand, but you're going to swap your Offhand weapon out for Vengeful Gladiator's Ripper, and that'll be your best loadout. If you are a speedrunner, I would highly suggest the Season 3 Mainhand and Offhand fist weapons, or you can aim for the Hunter-specific two-handed axe, as it's going to provide 60 or 62 stamina respectively. That's really not a small amount to be scoffing at. Before you obtain these items, however, Twin Blade of the Phoenix is a really good option, and it provides 53 stamina as well as some very good DPS stats. Now looking at some alternatives, Talon and Claw of the Phoenix are still relatively good for Phase 3, and weapons such as Tracker's Blade, Claw and Fist of the Molten Fury, Blade of Savagery, they're okay, but they're not really recommended and I wouldn't aim for them specifically. And now for something surprising, Claw of the Watcher from Heroic Crypts is still one of the best Mainhand options for us, providing you regem it with 2 Delicate Crimson Spinels, you put plus 20 Agility enchant on it. If you pair this with Boundless Agony, it's very close to your best in slot option. However, early on, getting red gems is not going to be an easy thing, so regemming this isn't really viable, and I wouldn't suggest doing it. The next thing we're going to look at is what should I prioritize in my guild's 3-item wish list or loot list, whatever your guild works with. The real answer is there is no cut and dry 3 items that you should really be aiming for. This can change depending on what your personal gear situation is at the time of phase 3 releasing, and if you have the items mentioned earlier in the video that allow you to transition to tier 6 immediately, you should be putting tier 6 gloves, shoulders, and Cursed Vision of Sargeras at the top of your list. If you don't have the required items, however, then your highest priority is going to be Cursed Vision of Sargeras, Stormrage Signet Ring, and Madness of the Betrayer. This will provide you with your best setup for your hit rating. However, if you do choose to prioritize these items, keep in mind that they're all highly contested by many other classes, and expecting all 3 before anybody else really isn't realistic. Therefore, I'd put the 2 remaining tier 6 tokens, being the legs and chest, relatively high on your list. I also personally recommend picking up Halberd of Desolation as a temporary weapon to help you with your hit cap early on, if you need it. However, I wouldn't put this high up on your wish list, as there's not going to be any other classes contesting you for it, and it's more or less just going to be a free item pickup. This wraps up the Phase 3 Beast Mastery Best in Slot video. If you found this video helpful, then please like and subscribe for more future content. And if you have any further questions, or perhaps you have a gear set that you don't see posted in my document and you want me to look into it, by all means reach out to me in the Classic Hunter Discord, or you can join my new Hunter BiS Discord linked in the video description below. Thank you and see you next time.